Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the October meeting of the Finance Committee. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Doug, are there any public speakers?
I believe we have one public speaker, Murray Bowden.
Good afternoon. One of the most important lessons that I learned was never to create a liability that someone can sue me or my family and bankrupt me. Some police officer a number of years ago took me down, sat me down and said, "Murray, protect your family. Don't create some of the things that I used to do before I understood that, I no longer do. I follow the rules as closely as possible." Metro-North Railroad at the Mount Kisco train crossing has painted a red box at the intersection of two roads. One of them happens to be a railroad, but it's still a road. That's not in that manual of uniform traffic control devices. A box where two roads intersect and you want people to come out, stay out of, is all over New York City. They've just added them in Ardsley. Don't block the box in New York City. It's a 2-point violation, I believe. So that by leaving a red box, and you don't use red because colorblind people cannot see red, which is why over a toll booth the arrow is an X and an arrow, green arrow, but the color makes no difference. Metro-North, by painting that red box, has put a potential financial liability to the MTA for any accident happening anywhere near it. They'll say, "We were confused by the red box because it's not in that manual. You all asked me to follow these rules," and I do. The emails that I've sent out notifying Metro-North about it have been gone to as many as 80 line copies. This video of me telling you about it is a searchable public record. Metro-North does not have the right to make up their own rules in contradictory to the Federal Highway Manual. You're on notice that Metro-North has created a significant possible liability, and you can bet in this environment today, somebody, when there's an accident, is going to sue. So you have been forewarned, prior knowledge, call it what you will. But I've done my due diligence. Now it's your turn. Thank you.
That concludes the public speakers. May I have a motion for the approval of the September 26th meeting minutes, and may I have a motion to approve? Second. Any comments or questions regarding those minutes? All in favor? Aye. Doug, could you work us through the work plan, please? I'm sorry, Neil, go ahead.
An incredibly important note on page 4, my name is spelled N-E-A-L, not N-E-I-L, so whomever is the responsible authority, just please.
Prendergast. For some reason you take it personal. I don't blame you. Doug, please, the work plan.
I never have that problem. So there are no changes to the work plan. And next we have Budget Watch. Yeah, it's a pretty simple Budget Watch this month. We're going to be talking about operating results through September and subsidy results through October. And in both cases, we're comparing those numbers with the mid-year forecast that Bob presented in July. Starting with passenger revenues, they were $3.7 million above forecast in September, with year-to-date. Sorry about that. With year-to-date results being on target. They reflect favorable ridership at MTA Bus and the Long Island Railroad, as well as favorable quarterly average fare adjustments for New York City Transit MetroCard Unlimited Ride passes, which are reviewed on a quarterly basis. These favorable results were partially offset by unfavorable results at Metro-North. Part of that was the Park Avenue Viaduct impact, which had not been considered in our reforecast, but they also have some lower non-commutation ridership. Toll revenue, as Don Sparrow mentioned earlier, continues to perform well. Positive results in September has increased the year-to-date variance to $5.6 million or 0.4%. Expenses in September were mainly on target, as were year-to-date results, which were $13.3 million favorable or 0.2%. We've had some lower labor costs and electric power costs. We've had some timing savings. These were mostly offset by non-cash accrual update of New York City Transit workers' comp liability expenses. Debt service costs continue to run favorable. They were favorable for the month and year-to-date due to lower rates, the timing of debt service deposits, refunding savings, and savings due to the issuance of Hudson Rail Yard obligations. Moving to subsidies, those also were favorable for October. On a year-to-date basis, they're exceeding the forecast. We have favorable results with MTA Aid, PMT, and petroleum business tax receipts. Those are partially offset by lower real estate activity taxes. So to summarize, overall preliminary net results were favorable for the month and year-to-date. A lot of that was in this month. We were pretty much on target, but we had a good month. We are currently analyzing those trends, and when we finalize the reforecasts, you will see those next month when we present the November financial plan. That's it. Any questions? Yes, sir.
I have a question on the Metro North part of this report. Has the City of New York reimbursed us for the damage on the Park Avenue viaduct?
I don't have that answer. Is somebody from Metro North here?
Does anybody have it?
Any other questions on Budget Watch? Okay. Next would be Finance Watch, and Pat McCoy.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Finance Watch is appearing on page 20 of your committee materials this afternoon. The first item, the $43.4 million MTA Dedicated Tax Fund Refunding Bonds, Series 2008 B3B. We had just completed this at the time of the last meeting, so I won't go over those details. We did cover that in last month. As you see on upcoming transactions, $632 million MTA Transportation Revenue Refunding Bonds, Series 2016D. We just closed on that this morning at an all-in true interest cost of 2.86%. This was entirely a refunding issue, and we achieved net present value savings of 14.15% of the refunded bonds, or $112.7 million. So this really cleans up the last of our candidates in the portfolio that would be refundable, and we're very pleased with the way this transaction went. This was senior managed by Jeffries and Company, one of our senior managers on the prior rotation, and they did a good job of putting a lot of pieces together. And Mr. Merdler, Commissioner Merdler, you've often asked about our auction rate securities, and I'm pleased to report that in this refunding transaction, we eliminated all remaining auction rate securities out of the portfolio, refunded, and so I'm happy to report that today. Next, we have some remarketings that we accomplished. $75 million transportation revenue variable rate refunding bonds, 2012 G3, and then also the Series 2002 G1H. We put these out for a competitive bid, and we were very pleased with the results. The $75 million will remarket out until 2020, February 1st, 2020, at a percentage of LIBOR plus a spread of 70 basis points. So again, a good result there on competitive bidding, and a 0.82% on the $56 million tranche that will go out to 2022. So again, these transactions allow us to take advantage of the short end of the yield curve as variable rate. Next, we have the $108 million Triborough Bridge and Tunnel Authority variable rate refunding bonds, 2005 B4A, 4B, and 4E. We combined all these bonds into one tranche of $108 million. This will reset at 67% of 1-month LIBOR plus a spread of 70 basis points. So both of these transactions, the transportation revenue and the TBTA, were put out for competitive bidding. We received good, strong, aggressive bidding, approximately 9 bids in each case. Again, keeping our variable rate portfolio intact and healthy is a key here, and we've been able to achieve that. Next, we have the fuel hedging program. On September 22nd, we executed a fuel hedge, 2.9 million gallons of ULSD. This was, again, put out for competitive bid, and you see the result there of $1.59 per gallon, and that was won by Goldman Sachs, Jay Aaron. I'm sorry?
What is it?
As with all the fuel hedges, it's a 24-month hedge.
24?
So 50% of our estimated fuel need for 12 months, and then declining amounts to the 24th month, and the final, that being the final month. Also, we actually bid on this month's fuel hedge just a couple hours ago, and we locked in a similar volume of ULSD at $1.62 per gallon, and the winning bid there was by Macquarie. So that concludes Finance Watch. I'm happy to take any questions.
Pat, there was a question this morning at the railroad meeting about the RIF loan, the final maturity of the RIF loan, the amortization period of the RIF loan.
Oh, sure. Okay.
Speak to that.
Yeah, as you can see here, we did report on the RIF. We successfully had our first drawing on the RIF loan. Just to reacquaint you, again, this is a loan that we executed with the Federal Railroad Administration, acting on behalf of the Department of Transportation. The rate on the loan is 2.38%. It's a 20-year loan. And our first draw was just done this past month for $146.5 million, and that's evidenced by work that's already underway at both Long Island Railroad and Metro North Railroad to implement positive train control. Again, we're on track to to get that in place by late 2018, and the loan will finance on a reimbursement basis all the work that's expected there. Again, a 20-year loan.
That was my question. Thank you.
Okay. And that, for what it's worth, that ties to the estimated average useful life of all the equipment that's involved in the project.
Okay. Next, we're moving to MTA headquarters and all agency items. In the months preceding the November plan and after the July plan, we put on the agenda the July plan 2017 preliminary budget, just to give folks an opportunity to opine on that. That's why that's on the agenda. And the next item, it's back to Pat. It's a presentation on the annual review of the derivative portfolio. Yeah.
Thank you. So this presentation begins on page 32, and we'll also put it up on the screen here. This is a work plan item. We report on our derivative portfolio each year. Where should I be pointing this? I want you, Patrick, just to go ahead and advance then. Thank you. Our derivative program reduces budget risk by employing interest rate and fuel hedging strategies. Our synthetic fixed rate portfolio remains low cost versus traditional fixed rate debt. And just to summarize, we have 12 derivative contracts with 8 different counterparties. These were all executed in the period of 2001 through 2007. The all-in, fully loaded cost of these transactions is 4.18%. That compares very favorably to our 4.04% traditional long-term fixed rate. And that includes the period of these last few years where we've had historic low rates and we've been able to refinance down. On the fuel hedging program, as we talk about this almost on a monthly basis, The program mitigates budget risk by dollar cost averaging half of our ULSD expenses, principally for the diesel fueled bus fleet as well as for diesel fueled locomotives at both railroads. And here you see we have 23 hedges with 4 different counterparties. Final maturity is now out into 2018, so fairly short duration. And the average locked-in rate for the next 12 months is $1.67 a gallon. And I'll go into some more detail with that in a minute. If we could move to the slide 2. Thank you, Patrick. Our debt portfolio is designed to manage budget volatility while maintaining a low cost of capital. As you can see here, the blue slice of the pie, almost 86% of our debt is in fixed rate mode. And that's certainly a good thing, particularly given the low rate environment we've been in. We've been able to bring that cost down. Our synthetic fixed rate of $2.4 billion, 6.8% of the portfolio we'll be talking about today. And then we also have unhedged variable rate, and some of those transactions we just talked about fall into that yellow slice of $2.6 billion or 7.6% of the portfolio. We manage interest rate exposure through a combination of low-cost synthetic fixed rate portfolio management through refundings and reasonable floating rate debt. The exposure to liquidity events is manageable with a total variable rate debt load of just over $5 billion allocated between bank facilities and those floating rate notes. Again, those products that we just talked about. Next, please. Outstanding synthetic fixed rate debt is declining and remains low cost. Again, as I talked about earlier, the average cost of this portfolio is 4.8%, including fees and excluding the benefit of upfront payments. If we take out the fully loaded component, the variable rate component, the cost is actually 3.5% and a fairly short duration of just 11.7 years. So we can believe that continues to be manageable in the interest rate environment we're in. Mark-to-market values, while we look at them and we focus on them, they do not impact the capital or the operating budget. They're a theoretical replacement cost of the contract itself and have no meaning unless we were to actually implement a termination or a novation. Turning to the, and you can see here, this is a full schedule of all of our transactions together with the counterparty that we're facing, the ratings of those counterparties, which are an integral part of the agreement itself, the notional amount of the transactions leading to the $2.4 billion number, and as you can see, it's declined through normal amortization over the past year, the percent of the total, and then the MTM is what we call the mark-to-market, and again, that's a theoretical replacement value. If we were to want to terminate, we would be a net payer on those transactions due to the current low interest rate environment that we're in. However, there is no plans to do that, and that is just there for your information. I would just say that we continue to seek novation opportunities to increase counterparty credit strength or improve economic or credit terms. You may recall that, in fact, if you turn the page, Patrick, in April, we novated or essentially moved 3 interest rate swaps from UBS AG to half to U.S. Bank and half to Wells Fargo with TBTA as counterparty. These trades really moved us to, one, diversify counterparty risk and to move to higher rated counterparties. And UBS AG has been actively reducing its municipal exposure and agreed to cover the costs related to the assignment. So this was a costless transfer on our part to a better result. What did we get through this transaction? Diversification of exposure among 2 higher rated entities. Sir. No, we are not. This occurred obviously before these matters came to light. No new business.
We're remaining committed to the statement that was made at the last cycle. We've taken on no new business and will not before coming back to the board. We're reevaluating and paying attention to what all other entities similar to us are doing with existing agreements they have with Wells Fargo, and we will make reasoned decisions based upon the input we get, but we have entered into no new agreements with Wells Fargo.
Sir.
Before we delve too deeply into the next parts of this report, Just for the sake of clarity, what, if anything, can go wrong with the synthetic fixed-rate securities?
Sure. There are a number of risks that we do focus on. The first being counterparty risk, the risk of that the entities that we're facing might go bankrupt or fail to perform their obligations. In those cases, as the non sort of the non actionable party, we would be in a favorable position to negotiate terms that would be in our favor. So counterparty risk is one. Basis risk is another one, where the variable rate that we are paying might not match the variable rate that we're receiving. So we might have that risk to deal with in the portfolio. Those are really the two principal risks that we think about in the derivatives portfolio that I think are notable here. Not at this time, no. Okay. So just to wrap up this, the novation that we did, we had a simplification of the overall swap structure to improve liquidity. We did reduce the fixed rates payable by 2.8 basis points, and we improved swap documentation and credit terms. Let's move on to fuel hedging. Just to recap, we hedge 50% of our ULSD fuel costs to protect the budget from volatility. And our goal, again, is to hedge 50% of the next 12 months' estimated volume, and with declining amounts to the 24th and final month. So each month we're layering on a new transaction. We do all of these transactions through competitive bidding with highly negotiated commodity ISDA agreements with currently 4 counterparties. And you see here Merrill Lynch Commodities at J. Aaron and Company, which is a division of Goldman Sachs, J.P. Morgan, and Macquarie Energy. Macquarie was our newest member, added in November of 2015. We are in discussions with an additional counterparty. I would just say that these things take a very long time to negotiate, and I'll report back to the degree that we're able to add a new counterparty there. Next. And here you see how the hedges look over time. You see our actual results on the left here, with the hedge portion in the dark blue at the bottom, the total portion being stacked on top. And you can see that over the next 12 months, we're hedged at a 50% level, declining out to the final month of August of 2018. This is just a really effective way to manage the volatility of this commodity in the budget, and it's performing as we would expect. You have a question?
I do. We have talked about this. It's obviously a very savvy and mainstream approach that all private sector companies that have fuel exposure do. I'm just looking at page 9, and so I'm just interested to know what's the cost of the hedge. And I totally agree that it's valuable to have that predictability. But when you look at the difference under the curve, under the effectively the dotted line versus what would be the unhedged version, what's the cost? What are we paying effectively for the privilege of having predictability in total? Let's say for 2015 or something.
Yeah. So in the committee materials, let me just direct you to the fuel hedge program is summarized on page 152. And so let's just take a look at that because that's really where we summarize this. And let me just.
Yeah, doing this digitally is not as fun as it used to be. Yeah.
You have to change your orientation on your iPad. But as you can see here, we have the date of the forward looking. So we're looking ahead now. This is the future. And so I'll report back to you next month on the historical. But looking ahead, you see the gallons hedged per month, the percent of the expected gallons purchased. So again, we're aiming for roughly a 50% level there. The weighted average hedge price for each month. And then you look at how this compares to our budgeted amount for that particular period. And as you can see, we migrate from $1.73 in 2016 to where we're looking at 2017 and looking at $1.84 per gallon. That's what's in the budget. Going out to 2018, we increased to $2.10 per gallon as our estimate on fuel. So as a practical matter, we look at our hedge transactions on a monthly basis. We get those detailed reports from the counterparties, and we settle up on a monthly basis. We either pay because prices are lower, or we receive because prices are higher. Quite frankly, we want prices to be lower because, remember, half the portfolio, half of our need is not hedged. And so, so looking forward, this is how it compares, though, to the budget. And I think, again, it's a mitigant to those volatile price spikes that we have seen historically. Sorry.
If you go to the next page, on the next page, you'll see how it compares with our actual results. And as Pat was saying, what we really are trying to do is we're trying to avoid what we call the downside, but that's when fuel prices are much higher than we have in the budget, because we have very little means of adapting to that.
You don't have to sell me on the purpose of it. I totally agree. I'm just trying to. So it sounds like page 154. It's
Yes.
$4 million it cost us for the privilege of having the hedge. Am I reading that correctly?
Yes.
That's right.
Okay, got it. That's all. I'm just trying to. So $4 million equals stability, and we would have had $4 million more, but we may have had some insanity or not, and we get to sleep at night.
That's correct.
Okay.
Chuck?
Who is the custodian of the fuel?
It's not. These are not.
We're not actually buying fuel. These are financial transactions, and we're not actually. These are not physical. It's financial. So.
So they are not translatable into a call on a person or entity to provide fuel.
That's right.
No, it's strictly financial.
You're covering your financial risk.
Yeah, this is covering financial risk. The agencies are going out and they've got their contracts with their suppliers, and it's all summarized by that schedule that we just looked at, and budgeted. But that's right. Independent of the hedging. The hedging is really a financial tool.
Andrew?
If hedging is a good idea, and from everything you've shown us it is, why at August of 18 are we so little hedged?
Well, again, that's the program that we've set up is really intended to have very clear visibility for 12 months with declining amounts out to the 24th month. Part of the reason is as you go further out in the fuel financial hedging for fuel, those forward curves get to be steep, and it gets to be more costly to go further out on the curve.
But aren't we re-hedging every so often? And
every month. So every month we're going out, we're adding a new month onto the end. So we're always going to be looking out 24 months. So
by the time August of 18 rolls around, we'll be very little hedged, and we could be in for...
No, by the time August of 18 rolls around, we'll be 50% hedged, and then we'll be looking out into 2020 at that point.
We'll do new transactions.
That's right.
Yeah, we'll be doing new transactions in the interim.
Expecting, but this chart shows 4% hedged by August of 2018. Is that only on the ones that are done now?
That's the snapshot now.
Okay.
So, but next month I'm going to come to you with a new hedge that's going to layer on September of 2018, and so again, okay. All right. So let's see. We were. Why don't we go to the next slide, Patrick? Here you see the hedge price helps determine the fuel budget, and as you can see, the budget being the horizontal lines, and currently the 2016 budget, with the hedge price declining and being a component that we look at relative to the budget, and that's really just summarized on page 154, like we discussed, 2017 and 2018. So you can see that, as the price of fuel has come down, we've been in a position to be a net payer on the swaps, and that's really really okay, because again, half of the budget isn't hedged. We want to be in a lower rate environment. And then next page, again, we've kind of covered this. The program provides budget stability while protecting against these commodity price spikes. We're layering on new hedges every month. And with, again, the rationale is with limited resources to protect the budget from negative volatility, this strategy will reduce the impact of potential spikes in fuel prices. So I'm happy to take any other questions. All right, thank you.
Okay.
Next, we have the update on
Good afternoon. The BSC was established by the MTA Board in 2009 and went live in 2011. It consolidated back office operations for human resources, finance, and payroll on one common platform, PeopleSoft 9.0. This report discusses the progress we've made in the last year. Oh, thank you. Okay. This report discusses the progress we've made in the last year. It's posted on the MTA website and Director's Desk in the exhibit book. I'll provide the highlights. Our scope is increasing with non-core procurement consolidation, which is $3.8 billion in terms of annual spend. The BSC and the agencies have worked hard to have better engagement. This occurs at three main levels. At the Executive VP level, the BSC Steering Committee meets monthly to listen to agency input, share our performance, and build consensus. The governance level, we meet with HR directors, controllers, and chief procurement officers to converge on common business processes. And finally, we invest time and resources in organizational change management to achieve support for upcoming changes. When the BSC was established, it was given several operational benchmarks. We've met 5 out of 6 and now plan to develop new ones with input from trade associations and consultants. It's important to note that our cost per invoice, which is $13 indirect cost, is much better than where the cost was prior to the BSC. We found documentation from Accenture and the BSC team that the cost per invoice was $30 before consolidation. To improve on that, we're looking for established technology in optical character recognition so that our invoices can be matched to our receipts and paid expeditiously. And that should improve our metric in that area. The BSC generates savings and avoid unnecessary costs. Fundamentally, we were established to generate savings, and the outcome has been favorable. The composition of these savings has evolved because we learned more about the challenges and obstacles to achieve the initial vision. But today, I'm happy to report that based on the 3 types of savings, annual operational savings at the BSC of $14.3 million, additional work that BSC picked up even though it was not in our scope, and finally, the most important one, which is a savings or cost avoidance of about $85 million every 5 years, which mitigates the need for having duplicative general ledgers, account payable systems, and account receivable systems, and procurement systems in all agencies and the maintenance thereof. Now we're going to PeopleSoft 9.2. We pushed the older release of PeopleSoft as far as it could, and then we upgraded to the latest release. In January, we upgraded Human Resources to release 9.2 and reduced customizations by 24%, which allows us to benefit from feature improvements that become available from Oracle. Our focus on a positive user experience is reflected in a portal interface that gives employees and managers access to helpful information, such as relevant benefit forms, pay advices, and upcoming training. Recruitment has been made easier. Job applicants can now see the status of their own applications in real time, while employment officers benefit from automated applicant screenings. We receive 42,000 job applications, and we process 500 new hires every single month. We're now accessible to mobile devices with additional functionality slated for late November. These include receipting for inventory and requisition approval. We've partnered with agency chief procurement officers and controllers to roll out a new release of PeopleSoft Financials with greater functionality. I'm very thankful for the support they have given us in testing the system. Core modules such as accounts payable, accounts receivable, project costing, asset management, treasury, general ledger are part of this upgrade. We've reduced customization by 36% across all these functions. Whenever we say reduce customizations, that automatically translate to more efficient maintenance of our system and ultimately simplification and savings to the MTA. While the procurement departments were underserved by the initial implementation of PeopleSoft, this release will satisfy pent-up demand for functionality. As an example, one of the pain points identified was the slowness in getting requisitions approved. Workflows have since been revised to minimize delay in routing. Vendor rotation and performance are also included in the new platform. There have been key changes to supplier processes. Here are some of the changes on the slide. I won't go over all of them, but they provide collaboration, reusing bit factors, and integrating processes across PeopleSoft for MTA staff. And for suppliers, they will be able to see their purchase orders, maintain their profile, and select categories to be informed about for future opportunities. Bidders and suppliers will be using the portal for working with the MTA, allowing for efficient self-service. That's 7,000 additional customers that the BSC will handle going forward that we did not have before. Authorized employees will also be able to use the marketplace and PeopleSoft to request common items through the system against established contracts. We're going live with office supplies, and shortly thereafter we're going to go forward with Granger, and that will facilitate the procurement cycle. The BSC shifted to a more complete application platform while partnering with the agencies and the supplier community, and I think we're going to continue to do the same of this work going forward. Thank you for listening.
I'd just like to add, some of this is painful for some of us, and maybe even board members, but this is the third management structure we've had in the BSC to get us to this point. With Weil's leadership and the active participation of the agency heads, we've been able to get to this point. For 20 years, there was talk about how we could consolidate certain functions that were common across all the platforms of the agencies, but we could never get there. And we're getting there. And the credit goes to the people at the agency head level and to Weil, because this is a very large organization. I wouldn't say competing priorities, but different priorities. And they're all coalesced around the one thing. Because if we can achieve savings here, and we can truly get efficiencies, it doesn't come out of service. So to their credit, they've done an excellent job.
Thank you, Tom.
Okay, we have one more information item in your book. It's the semi-annual investment report. If there are any questions, in that case, Angel Barbosa is here to discuss HQ procurements.
Thank you, Doug. So for headquarters, there are 9 procurements for a grand total of $52.5 million. The details are in your finance books. There are 7 competitive procurements for personal miscellaneous services and modifications for a total of $47.2 million. Chairman?
Second, any comments or questions? All in favor? Aye.
There are 2 procurement actions for ratification for a total of $5.35 million. Chairman?
May I have a motion? Second, any comments or questions?
Quick question for you on
yes, Jamie?
On the shallow, is that how we pronounce it, partnerships, the Verizon?
Sure.
That's for ultimately providing Wi-Fi in the bus, from what I'm reading.
Correct.
Is that right?
Yes.
And when we provide that Wi-Fi to a rider on the bus, the MTA will pay for the data?
Correct.
Essentially?
Yes.
So I guess something that struck me was the price on that data, which was $5 per gig.
Correct.
And if you went onto Verizon's website and bought 100 gigs a month, you'll pay $4.50 a gig. And we must be buying terabytes of data under this contract ultimately.
The $5 per gig I believe you found a rate at a lower rate on the website?
Just go on their website right now, and if you buy 100 gigs a month, they'll sell it to you for $4.50 a gig. So, we must ultimately be poised to buy a massive volume of data.
Massive.
Right.
And that's why it's a $30 million.
Right. So it just struck me that,
We'll take that back and check, because that might be a typo. But this is based on a previous solicitation and contract that we came to the board with, where we have contracted with 4 cellular providers. And even at that time, the pricing that we had was significant savings. So I can check into that to see, and possibly it's a typo, but I'd like to have a chance to verify that.
Okay, appreciate it.
Any further questions? All in favor? Aye.
Doug.
Which one do you?
We're moving to agency sections now. The
there was
Metro North Railroad and Long Island Railroad
this is the
joint
question
meeting
about the IT and the service contract. No, I watch all the committee meetings. No, I do. Listen, I've said this before. The engaged discussions we have at the committee meetings and the board meetings are very fruitful. So I watch all of them. Kind of watch with one eye and do work with the other eye. But there was a discussion. I believe Andrew Saul brought it up in relation to this procurement. So we've asked Sid to come in and respond to it. Andrew's not here, but we'll make sure he gets the question.
So in 2013, we started with the consolidation of IT across all the agencies into one headquarters organization. We are looking at all our software contracts, our maintenance contracts, our hardware contracts, and as soon as they're done, we take that as an opportunity to look at them all, working with partnership with procurement, and rationalize them and coming into one contract. So we've done that with Microsoft. We have an enterprise license agreement with Microsoft. We've done it with Oracle. We've done it with IBM. We just finished a managed print services contract, which will manage the printers and the copiers and the scanners across all the agencies. That went to HP. One of the first things we did was look at the network equipment that we had. We're all over the place. Juniper, Checkpoint, Avaya. We set a standard. We went out through New York City Transit's procurement exercise, and we chose Cisco as the vendor across. So we are taking it serious. We also have a new exercise, again, working with Angel's people, with KPMG to look at our 100 biggest suppliers, both maintenance and software, and we're really going out to the market, making sure that we're paying fair rates, and then Angel's going to negotiate below those rates for us. All right.
Mr. Merdler?
When you negotiate with the software manufacturers, let me take a hypothetical contract, it's for 5 years. At the end of the 5 years, do you take any action at all to protect against the possibility that the provider will not give you a license to do something as to which he has a proprietary interest, so that you are stuck with him on renewal, you are stuck with him on extension, you are stuck with him in any way?
We do have a couple of cases where that is the truth. We have that. Siemens is one of those vendors. When we would decide to go out and get a turnkey train control system, it runs on their OS. They take a commercially available OS like Sun Solaris, they take it into their shop, and they change it, where I can't even get it certified by Sun. What we've done is we've trained our staff as much as possible to wean a lot of that work off of Siemens, but in this particular case, that core code, we don't have the core competence to manage it, so we'll always need some kind of maintenance with Siemens to do that. That's just one example.
Take a look at the Cubic contract that's in here now. We're stuck in here for 22 years because they're the only ones who have the intellectual property rights. And there is no generic that can be used. What I am saying to you, and what I am suggesting to you, and what I have been suggesting, as has Andy Saul, and I believe Freddie Ferrer for the past umpteen years, is you have got to guard against that. Because otherwise you are held hostage.
Again, in working with Angel, we try to, in these long-term contracts, put in some price protection at the outlying years. But understood, we'll look at that some more.
Ask to get, if you want to have it, one of the factors that will decide whether you choose A rather than B is, will they at the end of the term give you a license? If not, renewed.
Agreed.
All right.
There was a corollary to it that actually teed up the discussion on the IT, and that was the fact that we were seeking a modification to an existing agreement for the software that controlled the logic of an automated warehouse at the New Haven maintenance shop facility. To say that the relationship with Connecticut is a somewhat complex and complicated one is an understatement. We're a contract operator to them. They pay 65% of the cost, we pay 35%. We do not unilaterally take decisions with respect to anything to do with the maintenance operation and capital improvements on the Connecticut portion. So we do that jointly. They could not enter into a long-term agreement, and that's why we had to come back to this, because of some specific requirements they have. But I just wanted to make that point, because I believe Andrew Saul made the point we should have just done this and incurred the risk. That's not the nature of the relationship we have with the state of Connecticut. David?
Just a corollary to Mr. Mordliner's issue. Having been a city official that cost the city of New York not much against this, about $10 or $15 million by investing in a system called Philips MyCom. Philips continued to exist, but decided overnight to pull the plug on a whole hardware line. By that time, about half the city agencies in the city of New York, a long time ago. And this is the other risk, obviously, we have, that of getting tied into one provider, particularly of fast-moving technological devices, that suddenly, because of market forces or the rest, are left as orphans, and there's nothing to do but replace the whole system. So, you know, nothing you can do exactly to prevent against it, but it can be costly, of course.
Oh, go ahead, Mitch. Okay.
Thank you, Andrew. I just had a question on the CTC engineering assessment of the railway highway grade crossing. I apologize for not raising it before I voted. I would have voted the same way, but it indicates that they are designing a series of grade crossing elimination safety programs, for lack of a better term. Are they actually also installing them, or are they just engineering them and we have to install them, or we have to get somebody else to install them?
It's installation as well.
At how many sites, or do we know how many sites?
Right now we're doing 4 as a pilot, and then we'll add another 11. Altogether it will be 16,
15. Okay. Could you provide the board members with the list of the 15?
Sure.
That would be very helpful.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Now, when we say that they're going to do the installation, it's with a fairly high level of coordination with the signal forces at both railroads. So
Correct.
it's not like they're just
Right.
installing it, dropping it, and walking away.
Understand. But so in the end, 15 sites will be done.
Correct.
And then that will kind of be to see whether they work in that regard.
What the outcome is, the effect of the passive versus the types, right?
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Go ahead.
Okay. Moving to the Metro North and Long Island Railroad combined items, we have an action item from Metro North requesting approval to lease wireless spectrum in 7 New Jersey counties to New Jersey Transit in compliance with an order of the FCC requiring the MTA to sell or lease on commercially reasonable terms spectrum to NJT as part of the granting of additional spectrum to the MTA for implementation of positive train control, PTC.
Can I have a motion?
So move.
Second? Comments, questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Angel, you want to take it over with the
Yeah,
procurements?
well. So next we have Metro North and Long Island Railroad procurements. For Metro North, there are 3 non-competitive procurements for a grand total of $4.3 million. 2 are seeking board approval for sole source miscellaneous service contracts for a total of $3.98 million, and 1 is seeking board approval for a contract modification to an existing agreement for a total of $355,000. Chairman.
Can I have a motion? Second? Comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
For Long Island Railroad, there are 2 competitive procurements, one being a contract modification for a grand total of $7 million.
Do you have a motion?
So move.
Second? Comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
For New York City Transit and MTA bus operations, there are 2 contract modifications for a grand total of $60.3 million.
Do you have a motion? Second? Any comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Now we're going to go to bridges and tunnels. We have 3 action items.
Before you get started, I watched that meeting as well. There was an extensive discussion. I watched and listened to that meeting. There was extensive discussion on the procurements that the President Don Spiro brought forward on ORT. My takeaway, don't hang me on exact details, but general consensus of the importance of ORT and moving forward with that. Concerns expressed by a number of board members with respect to delineation of costs associated with that and provision of more information on those before final action will be taken. So I've yet to have a conversation with Don, but I know Don well enough to know he's putting that information together, and I'll direct him to get it to you as soon as possible. Some may even come before the board meeting. I'd like to make a couple of points. We may not be the only entity in the United States that has the ability to charge more for tolls and have existing revenue left over in the form of surplus to subsidize the other parts of operations, but we're one of the few. It's something that's been in place from day one at the MTA, and it's exceptionally important. You just take a look at numbers, somewhere in the order of magnitude of $900 million to $1 billion a year crosses the threshold to subsidize our operations, which are extremely critical. To say that every time we have a fare and toll increase every 2 years, the issue of elasticity on the toll side comes forward, because the elasticity is a lot higher. For every dollar you charge an additional toll, people vote with not going over the facility. So we're concerned about that. And at a point in time where, I don't know how many of you traverse the bridges and tunnels with or without an Easy Pass, but even if you have an Easy Pass, you try to do it on Mother's Day, you wait in line. So for the traffic to clear long before the toll plaza, before you can get there. So one of the few benefits we can give them, we state a good repair across the entire system in our capital programs, but that's a given. They expect that. But something which is a benefit to reduce the amount of time they're going to spend, and ORT will do that, that's something we want to be aggressive with. And there was a very good discussion about how aggressive and how timely. At one end of the spectrum, we bid everything. We don't do anything change order. That takes time. On the rail side, less so on the bus side, there's a high level of sensitivity on the rapid transit side, the New York City Transit side, high level of sensitivity, not coming back every year and interfering with people's lives with continual work. On the number 7 line, in my 20 years, we've done a lot of work and constantly had one track out of service, or the express track out of service. And what the governor has challenged us to do to be transformational is how can we do work faster in a way where we impact the public less. So where we can use change orders and contract with existing contractors that are there to get work done faster, we're going to do that. The degree to which we can make sure that we have exact numbers in terms of what the cost will be, we will provide that. What will be difficult to do is how do we accrue that benefit? Because the elimination of a delayed minute in a car is worth value to us and to the drivers. And so we're trying to have that balance. And so we're moving aggressively forward. The second thing, I know, Polly, you asked the question about the issue of like how much equipment we buy. There's no doubt about it, with volume you get a better unit price. And so if we're sure we're going with ORT, and I think we're relatively sure we're going with ORT, there's a question about the pace of it, we ought to size the amount of the equipment hardware purchase in a way where we get the maximum value on a per unit basis. The individual gantries, how they'll be designed, will be different, but the equipment that hangs on them is basically the same. So I'm committing to the board to get that information to you before the board meeting, as much as we can before the board meeting. on Friday, and the dialogue will continue. But I just wanted to say those things. So, Doug?
Thanks, Tom. So in light of that, we have action items and procurements on that very subject matter. We're going to go over the action items first. So the first is we need to obtain the board's approval and adoption of a resolution which will find and determine that the proposed change in the method of toll collection at the Bronx Whitestone, Cross Bay Veterans Memorial, Marine Parkway Gil Hodges Memorial, Robert F. Kennedy, Throgs Neck and Verrazano Narrows Bridges, and the Queens Midtown and UL Carey tunnels to cashless, all-electronic, open road tolling will have no significant adverse effect on the environment within the meaning of the State Environmental Quality Act, SECRA, and adopt and approve this negative declaration in accordance with SECRA, and authorize and direct the President of the authority or his designee to execute it.
May I have a motion? Second? Any comments or questions? All in favor? Aye.
Next is to obtain the board's approval and adoption of a resolution changing the method of toll collection at the Bronx Whitestone, Cross Bay Veterans Memorial, Marine Parkway Gil Hodges Memorial, Robert F. Kennedy, Throgs Neck and Verrazano Narrow Bridges, and the Queens Midtown and UL Carey tunnels to cashless, all-electronic, open road tolling.
May I have a motion? Second? Comments, questions? Polly.
Comments, yes. And Tom, thanks. I think those were some helpful framing remarks. And I do want to reiterate one thing you summarized. We all love the idea of open road tolling and reducing traffic. I probably get more complaints about the traffic in your facilities than you do. So believe me, it would thrill me to...
They think they're yours.
Exactly. It would thrill me to decongest the Queens Midtown Tunnel. But, you know, you did hear some of my concerns. It's not just about the cost. I mean, I think it's funny. We just spent 20 minutes ad nauseum on fuel hedging. I wish we could have spent that amount of time talking about just... Again, just so we know, because we're voting on it, what this is going to cost, how the capital plan is rearranged, the issues of how we're handling fare evasion, et cetera. So I take you at your word, love to get all that information. I think not to slow this down, because I concur that I applaud the governor for wanting to do this quickly, but I do feel like as a board member, I do want to comprehend what I'm voting for, and I certainly am happy to agree with the secret piece of this and upping the fines, but sort of doing this transition without having any sense of the financial, fare evasion, et cetera, piece of it just definitely makes me feel uncomfortable.
Any further comments or questions? All in favor? Aye.
Okay. Now the third action item is a one abstain. We're seeking board approval and adoption of a resolution authorizing the President of the authority or his designee to take all preliminary steps as may be necessary and desirable in order to revise the authority's toll violation enforcement regulation to, number one, add provisions prescribing the procedural protection for owners seeking to have their tolls and unpaid violation fees dismissed or transferred from vehicle rental and leasing companies to renters and lessees, and warning that owners who persistently fail to pay tolls and violation fees may have their vehicle registration suspended by the New York State Department of Motor Vehicle. Two, to increase the violation fee imposed on owners from $50 to $100 for toll violations at the Bronx Whitestone, Robert F. Kennedy, Throgs Neck and Verrazano Narrow Bridges, and UL Carey and Queens Midtown tunnels, while continuing to impose a $50 violation fee for toll violations at the Henry Hudson, Cross Bay Veterans Memorial, or Marine Parkway Gil Hodges Memorial Bridges. And finally, three, authorizing the President of the authority or his designee to take all such steps that may be necessary and desirable to establish, implement, and permanently adopt pursuant to law the revised regulation.
May I have a motion? Second? Any comments or questions? Yes, Carl? Please use your mic.
With the tolls, you're going to stop somebody's registration, you're going to cut it off if it's not paid, is that correct?
Someone
Don.
Peg Terry?
Peg Terry. Barbara Terry.
Peg Terry from B&T is here.
In last year, the Department of Motor Vehicles adopted a regulation which authorizes the commissioner to suspend the registrations of individuals who fail to pay their tolls and violation fees in response to notices of violation on 5 separate occasions within 18 months.
I understand that, but I'm talking about rental cars.
With respect to rental cars are not subject to the registration suspension.
So if somebody, obviously you're not going to take all of Hertz's registrations away from them.
Correct.
How are we going to deal with that?
What rental cars typically do is when they receive a notice of violation, they assess the credit card of the person renting the car, and they charge multiple fees in addition to the underlying toll violation fee that we charge.
And then Hertz reimburses us. Is that correct?
Yes.
So they're going to have to collect that money.
And they typically do.
And if not, do we have any ramifications with the rental car?
We could sue the rental car company, but DMV excludes rental car license plates from its registration suspension program.
Okay, so they say that they're going to pay it.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
I have no doubts that the state of New York will go after a rental car company if they're not paying their fees. I have no doubts whatsoever.
As you heard from watching the discussion, we understand that open road tolling is going on all over, so it is likely that states will coordinate with other states when tolls are not paid. Have you had any discussions with the governor's office or elsewhere to try to get these interstate agreements so that everybody is made good?
A number of people on the governor's staff, but the governor got it relatively quickly, the importance of having reciprocity agreements, the importance of having ways to get people to pay, and enforcement on a per-vehicle basis for those people who may be identified as scofflaws. So the answer to the question in a general sense is yes, and there are a number of parties that are going to be involved. There were different issues with Easy Pass, and the people at Bridges and Tunnels can tell you about them ad nauseum. But you need to move together across a number of states on any of these. But open road tolling is coming for sure, and I dare say that Bridges and Tunnels led the way with Easy Pass, and New York State may be faster with open road tolling. That happens, he's going to have open road tolling. But like I said, the general answer to your question is yes. Revenue is treated very seriously. They treat it very seriously. Any further comments or questions? We have a vote up. Or do we? Yes.
Angel, there are some B&T procurements.
So for Bridges and Tunnels, there are 4 competitive procurements for modifications to existing agreements for a grand total of $141.4 million. Chairman.
May I have a motion? Second. Comments or questions? All in favor? Aye.
There are no
Abstain.
items. Sorry.
Yeah. And didn't we vote on the fines?
You voted on the...
I don't think we voted on the
That's what I
fines.
thought. We didn't vote. Yeah. No, we didn't vote. Yeah. We didn't vote on the fines. On the third one, we didn't vote. Okay, well, go back.
Okay.
Go back. I had asked questions, and I said, are there any further questions on the third? Okay. So we have a motion second. Okay, you had a question. So all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstain? You voted yes and you voted abstain. Okay. No, I thought you raised her hand the first time, but okay. One abstain. Got it. Okay. Okay.
And we're good on the procurements?
On B&T, there are no procurements for FemTech.
Right.
And so
next is real estate.
Okay, thank you, Doug. Good afternoon. We have 2 action items this afternoon, each the subject of a staff summary. First, we're asking you to make determinations and findings pursuant to Article 2 of the Eminent Domain Procedures Law with respect to the Myrtle Avenue Viaduct Reconstruction Project. We obtained your authorization in March of this year to commence negotiations with residents and property owners and take preliminary steps under the EDPL in order to effect a very necessary replacement of the viaduct. This is the M train where it meets the J and the Z. As we have described previously, that project is vitally important and needs to begin in the middle of next year. There are some 60 residential tenants or occupants involved, 3 commercial businesses and 2 empty lots. We anticipate, I think, very close to 100% voluntary agreements with the residences and the businesses. We may need to use condemnation power with respect to the two vacant lots. In any case, the findings and determinations that are statutorily required are set out in the staff summary. And if there are no questions, that I would ask you to approve them.
Yeah, many of the members of the Transit Riders Council got the opportunity to take a tour of the area around the Bushwick Viaduct, and it is in really rough shape, and there is a whole open field which the MTA must have access to in order to do repairs and everything. So whatever you have to do to get access to this, I think, is really important. If you want the M, the J, and the Z to be there for when the L train is out, we must do this vital work, and it is really crumbling. A visual inspection was quite an eye-opener.
Well, thank you. I mean, I think we've had, excellent support from the local elected officials. We've had extensive community outreach. My team has been out there door to door, and as I say, I think established excellent rapport with the affected residents. So this is really a procedural step to ensure that we can stay on schedule.
And if you want to really get technical, when this work is done, I think the trains are going to end up sounding quieter to the folks that live right next to this line.
Great.
2 feet off the line, literally.
The second item is
I just want to
you have a further comment on the same item?
Yeah, I just noticed from reading the staff summary and even the official notice, there's certain things we plan to do with certain people, including building someone a kitchen and some to replace what they have under the L, and there's some other actions we're taking in process of negotiations. Obviously, we're compensating people. I just wonder if at some point we could have the cost of this is what the cost of this whole property exchange we're doing with people.
Certainly, we can summarize it, and we'll give you a full presentation, because what the BMT did at the time they did this, what happened was the BMT, the Myrtle Avenue line, used to come all the way down into Brooklyn and cross the Brooklyn Bridge. And when they were kicked off the Brooklyn Bridge, they cut it over and swung it over. That's why it's called the Bushwick Cut. They bought pieces of property off the backs of lots. The structure was within 24 inches, 36 inches of building structures, something you'd never do today. No access to the facility. So, as was the case, or as is the case with Canarsie, cost is not the determining factor. We just have to do a replacement. But we will summarize.
Yeah, I just want to know what part of because
there were 2 outdoor kitchens that were part of the original agreement at the time the structure was built.
Yes, it says the easement. So these people have it can't be a prescriptive easement with the MTA, but they have easements to do this stuff, and we're buying them back, so to speak. And I just wonder what it's part, and this the whole cost is capital.
In one case, they're keeping the easement. We're just replacing the kitchen.
We can get into the particulars. I mean,
another time. Okay. But I just wonder what the total cost of this is.
I think we're doing it cost effectively. We will give you that information. I think, as Tom is indicating, it's a small.
We also have a time frame here that I was wondering. There's 2 people we have to use condemnation for. You're confident that we have the time frame to go through the condemnation procedure before it's this coming summer?
I think the summary point there is that it is our desire, and we believe it's within reach, not to have to do condemnation.
Right.
But we have to have this condemnation in the event we don't get that last person to agree to move.
But we have to move quickly. But we'll be able to have it done by this summer. It's a necessity.
People have been doing an awful lot of outreach.
Yep.
Okay. We need a vote on this, right, before we move on to the next item? Any further comments or questions? Okay. All in favor? Aye.
The second item relates to our advertising contracts. I am very much looking forward to coming back to you shortly to tell you where we have wound up as a result of our RFP process. It's really, I will say, it's extremely exciting. We're talking about transformational change, talking about thousands of digital screens to replace paper and vinyl in the system, with enormous consequences for not only for our revenues, but for our ability to communicate in real time with our customers. So stay tuned, please. In the meanwhile, we are asking you for authorization to, as needed, to enter into short-term extensions of our existing agreements with Outfront and Intersection as needed to ensure continuing uninterrupted ad sales and a seamless transition to our new contracts.
So what do we need to vote on? Do we vote on the extension?
The extension, yeah.
Moved? Seconded? Any comments or questions? Mr. Ferrer?
What is the limit of the temporary extensions that you propose?
Up to 6 months past December 31, which is the scheduled expiration.
And that is the final limit? Because we had a limit on an extension before. I just want to make sure this is the last time we'll deal with this.
Last time I will ask for it, yes.
I think one was extended. One was extended because they weren't the two procurements a year apart?
Yeah, there was the first action was in large part to coordinate the two. And
this is the final last time we're going to deal with this.
Yes, sir. And I would be very surprised if we're taking that entire time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. May I have a vote? You have a question? Yes, go ahead. Neil.
Jeff, what's the nature of the delay? Is it that you're down to 2 players and you're trying to finalize that, or you have selected a player but trying to figure out what their service offering is? Like, what's the nature of the status of what you're doing without giving anything away?
Well, I don't want to get too specific about, we have an open RFP, but we do have strong competition, which, accounts to some extent for our desire to, to play this out. But also, I'll say there are an enormous range of technical and logistical issues. As it has become apparent to us how ambitious the proposals are, it's been necessary for us to coordinate on a multi-agency basis with, specialists in communications, installation, environment, code, labor, the rest. So, it's an iterative process, and we are at a point where we are, I think, comparing apples to apples in our competitive process.
Some stuff we procure that's commodities relatively straightforward. We have systems that are very complicated. We do RFPs; they're more complicated. This is a one-off to even those. These are long-term contracts with a long-term option. It's a partnership. They're making significant investment, capital investment in the system that they need to see a return on. So we want to make sure that we're very aligned as we sign these agreements. So it's an extension of time rather than a delay, so that we get all the terms and conditions right.
Let me just add,
Mitch.
When we go through this, as you're going through it now, obviously we have 2 major goals in mind. One is to ensure that the media companies that are selling the advertising get that advertising to our customers. That's their goal. Our goal, in addition to that, is to have the ability to communicate our needs to our customers outside the advertising perspective. And I think that's what we had that conversation the last time we had this discussion about being able to use that equipment to communicate. I'll just use my example at Hicksville of what's going on in Hicksville, directly and immediately to our customers through their means.
That's right.
Okay.
And we've been honing in on very specific requirements in that respect.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
David?
Just very briefly, is this being coordinated with the open roll tolling and the kind of lighting and, aesthetics? Are we using the same systems to make sure we're communicating with our customers in that venue, rather than just making pretty pictures?
Well, one of our undertakings in this process has been to improve the coordination that we, frankly, are ourselves primarily responsible for in the way we communicate across agencies, and that we are bringing forward a strong, unified MTA brand. So that is certainly one of our objectives.
So it will also apply to bridges and tunnels?
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, this is not viewed as a sort of a billboard proposition. This is about largely about communicating on rolling stock and in stations, but certainly we want to be efficient in our communications at toll plazas and elsewhere as well.
That's information, right? No, vote. Okay, so all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, I think that completes the business for the today's meeting. May I have a motion to adjourn? Second, all in favor? Aye. We will reconvene in 5 minutes to hold the Capital Program Oversight Committee meeting.